A list of tasks crept into the bedroom in the early morning, shining on Fred's face and drumming his ears before settling under the blankets. Refusing to open his eyes, he turned away, but it alighted under his eyelids. At the top, and wreathed in fire, was written, "Find a contract to pay the accreditation fees today, or the kids will end up as soldiers, prostitutes, chipheads, or worse." He had underlined worse several times the night before, in a disturbingly clear memory of the diabolical joy he had gotten in programming the list to attack his sleep-addled morning self. Admitting defeat, Fred pried himself from bed and slapped the coffee icon where it hung dimly in the air. It was easy enough to find where his t-shirt and shorts had been dropped on the way to bed. The first whiffs of Nova Colombian dark roast began to build from the kitchen side of the room as Fred walked to where Los Angeles spread out before him. Branding images of local pizza joints, law offices, cafes, tech colleges, public modes of transportation, micro-manufactories, farmers markets, Asian restaurants, hotels, taxi services, elementary schools, and many, many apartment complexes like his own sat like a glittering fog as far as the eye could see. Fred's apartment was a few stories down, so he piped in the view with a network service. Opening his personal account, Fred zoomed away from Los Angeles high above the earth until he could see the sun shining down on the white-swirled grayish-brown of the Midwest, where morning was already happening. Among the national and state branding iconography, Fred's 7th-year students were still hard at work, their adolescent images executing the algorithms he had taught them to execute and programming the bots he had taught them to program. Their geographic literacy projects were due later that afternoon to the Global Education Ministry. Of course, GlobeEd wouldn't be giving them any credit for their projects unless Fred rustled up the money to cover his tutoring accreditation fees. But the kids didn't need to know that. School was supposed to be free. A few of them saw he was online and piqued him with questions they'd come up with since he'd been asleep. Young Sarah Rapenta was having trouble finding precise location points for a commercial district in Chicago she was rendering. Luke Thomas had done an excellent job recording all of the docks that ran into the Gulf off the coast of New Orleans, but couldn't figure out how to get them to overlap properly. Every student needed some pointer or some nudge. As Fred opened his toolbox and pulled out some bots that would point the kids in the right direction, a wide-eyed, middle-aged face materialized. "Frederick, thank dog." It was Geraldina, one of his most excited tutors and a member of the K-9 Universal Church. "Did Davis and Gwen send you their maps? We found out last night that neither of them chose areas large enough to qualify, so they both added some streets, but their vegetation stats are all wrong." Fred nodded. "Yes, I see. I'm sending them some addresses within the Topografo Global de Plantas. They should be able to integrate it all by the deadline. Because, you know, particularly with Gwen, there's no one at home to help her figure these things out." Fred was still nodding. "And Davis's family thought they'd been in government housing by now, but he's still in the shelter. At least it's the one downtown with network access. He tried to submit yesterday because he thought he had enough square kilos, but the proctor said it was too small." "Yes, I'll help him with it," Fred said, now getting annoyed. And he was a little scared because the proctor also told him not to contact them again until he was working with an accredited tutoring center. Why did he say that to Davis? Fred's hand stopped in midair. "Not sure," he lied. "I'll have to get with one of their finance magistrates and make sure they've been processing our payments correctly." Geraldina's face clouded a bit. "Okay, and you also checked that payment for me that didn't get processed last week too, right?" "Yes, that too, sorry," he said. He definitely intended to pay Geraldina. He even wanted to pay her, but if she didn't get paid, she would still teach the kids. If global education didn't get paid, there could be irreversible consequences, like the negation of test scores and other terrible things. Her face brightened back up. "Good, I'm going to take Mox and Phi to Disneyland this weekend, so I just need it by then." The Nova Colombian dark roast was fresh, but even with some cream and a pinch of Farmies to wake his nervous system, Fred was having trouble tasting it through the stress. "Right, this weekend is no problem," he said, and nodded until she left to help the kids finish their projects. Ordinarily, funding came for accreditation and rent from donors or municipal programs, but Fred and his team had taken on more students than ever this term, so things were tight. He had been making extra money contracting out his expertise, but the jobs rarely paid well and were usually illegal in the eyes of at least one governing body, which Fred didn't like, but his skills were in demand, hence the list. Pleased to be acknowledged, the list of tasks unfurled and promptly started vomiting notes and subtasks that accompanied each of its items. He frowned as the tasks stacked up higher than the countertops, finally curling over itself near the ceiling. He tapped and inspected the requests from gun runners, military contractor liaisons, corporate mercenaries, all offering various cash prizes to do nefarious things to their enemies over the virtual networks that encircled the Earth. As he looked for a contract that valued his ability to find, hide, and manipulate information, a green task wrote itself near the bottom of the list. It was small, but very bright. Call Duke Willingham at Verdisol Corp, it said. Tasks wrote themselves whenever someone left a message for him. This task was accompanied by a message from about 7 seconds earlier of an older, portly, bald man yelling about something. Not allowing himself to get excited, Fred opened it and was treated to a recording of Duke explaining how important it was that Fred call him immediately. The few times Fred had completed a contract for one of the Big 12 Corps, it was usually Duke who hooked him up, and they usually landed him enough pay to keep things stable for months. His heart started beating a little faster as he called Duke. Face and shoulders materialized in the kitchen. "Benson!" Duke shouted. He usually shouted. "Why did it take so long to call me? Never mind. You can live edit terra firma, right?" Fred didn't say anything at first. He could live edit, but it was against a dozen of the laws that governments took very seriously. "Yes, but I got a client with some assets in a firefight. I'm patching you into their rapid response team meeting now!" The kids, Geraldina, Southern California, and his apartment all melted away and became a virtual corporate conference room. Faces of Verdisol executives frowned and flummoxed in individual windows. The background of the meeting was a grainy, low-angle video, almost totally dark save for an off-camera blaze that illuminated a pile of trash and a violent muzzle flash skirmish in the shadows. A man screamed for his mother very close to the source of the transmission. Fred breathed deep and opened his toolbox.